What if the most powerful company in personal computing was built by refusing to build the computer itself? In the 1970s, that idea would have sounded almost backwards. The technology industry was dominated by companies that made physical machines. International Business Machines sold complete computer systems. Digital Equipment Corporation built its own hardware. MITS entered the emerging personal computer market with the Altair 8800. Apple would soon combine hardware and software into a single product. The common assumption was simple. The company that controlled the machine controlled the market. Hardware was visible. It could be manufactured, shipped, demonstrated, and sold. Software was often treated as something attached to the machine, a supporting tool rather than the foundation of an independent business. Bill Gates and Paul Allen saw something different. Microsoft began not by designing a computer, but by creating a version of the basic programming language for the Altair. Their product did not replace the machine. It made the machine useful. That distinction mattered. The Altair was a box of electronic components. BASIC gave people a way to tell it what to do. Microsoft was not selling the physical device. It was selling the layer that allowed users to interact with the device and developers to create new possibilities on top of it. At first, this was a small business serving a small market. Microsoft depended on hardware companies to reach customers. It did not own factories, retail stores, or a recognizable computer brand. Compared with the manufacturers building the machines, it appeared to control very little. Yet the software had one important characteristic. It was not permanently tied to a single piece of hardware. A machine could be sold only once. A software product could be adapted, licensed, and distributed across different systems. The same core capability could create value for several manufacturers without Microsoft having to build every device itself. That possibility challenged the dominant logic of the industry. If controlling the entire product created the strongest competitive position, then Microsoft should have built its own computer. It should have combined hardware and software, owned the customer relationship, and captured every stage of the sale. But Gates chose another path. He treated software as a product with value of its own. More importantly, he treated it as something that could sit between many hardware companies and millions of users. At that point, Microsoft was still far from an empire. It was a young supplier selling programming tools to companies with more capital, more distribution, and more control over the final product. The real question is how that apparent weakness became a source of power. Why did Bill Gates bet on software when the industry seemed to belong to the companies building the machines? And how did a business that owned no dominant computer eventually become one of the most influential forces in the entire technology industry? The answer begins at a time when software was still widely treated as an accessory, and Gates was already trying to turn it into an industry. That belief was already taking shape long before Microsoft became a household name. In 1975, personal computing was still an experimental industry. Most customers were hobbyists, universities, and engineering enthusiasts. Every manufacturer was building its own hardware around different processors, different designs, and different technical limitations. There was no universal platform, no dominant operating system, and no common software environment. For software developers, this created a difficult reality. Writing a program for one machine did not guarantee that it would work on another. Every new computer often required its own version of the same software. From a hardware company's perspective, that was perfectly acceptable because software existed primarily to make its own machines more attractive. Microsoft approached the situation differently. Instead of seeing each computer as a separate destination, the company focused on creating software that could be adapted for multiple systems. BASIC became the center of that strategy. Over the next several years, Microsoft developed versions of the programming language for a growing number of microprocessors and computer manufacturers. This was not simply a technical achievement. It reflected an emerging business model. Each new licensing agreement allowed Microsoft to earn revenue without investing in manufacturing plants' inventory or global distribution networks. Once the core software had been developed, additional versions could be created with far lower costs than designing and producing an entirely new computer. Bill Gates made his thinking unusually clear during this period. In 1976, he published what later became known as the Open Letter to Hobbyists. the letter criticized the widespread copying of Altair Basic without payment. Gates argued that professional software could not continue to improve if developers were expected to work without compensation. Today, that argument may sound obvious. At the time, it challenged the culture of the early personal computer community, where software was often shared freely and treated as an extension of the hardware rather than an independent product. The letter revealed something important about Microsoft's long-term direction. The company was not trying to make software more valuable because it wanted to sell computers later. It believed software itself deserved to be treated as intellectual property that could be licensed, improved, and distributed as a business in its own right. Even so, Microsoft's position remained fragile. The company still relied on hardware manufacturers to reach customers. If computer makers chose another programming language or developed their own software internally, Microsoft had very little leverage. It had technical expertise, but it did not control the products people actually bought. This dependency exposed a fundamental limitation. The company possessed an asset that could scale efficiently, yet it lacked a distribution channel large enough to transform that efficiency into market leadership. Everything depended on finding a partner capable of bringing Microsoft's software to a much larger audience. That opportunity arrived unexpectedly at the beginning of the 1980s. International Business Machines, the most respected name in enterprise computing, decided to enter the fast-growing personal computer market. The company needed to move quickly, and doing so required decisions that would reshape far more than its own product. Those decisions would soon create an opening that Microsoft had never possessed before, and they would change the relationship between software and hardware across the entire personal computer industry. International Business Machines moved with unusual speed. By 1980, the company had concluded that the personal computer market was growing too quickly to ignore. Instead of following its traditional approach of developing every major component internally, International Business Machines assembled a relatively small team in Boca Raton, Florida, and gave it an extraordinary mandate: build a personal computer fast enough to compete with the new generation of microcomputers. That decision changed everything. To save time, International Business Machines relied on commercially available components whenever possible. Intel supplied the processor. Other companies provided additional hardware. The remaining challenge was the operating system, the software responsible for managing the computer and allowing applications to run. Microsoft was approached because of its growing reputation as a software company. There was one problem. Microsoft did not yet own the operating system that International Business Machines needed. Rather than walking away from the opportunity, Microsoft negotiated first. The company reached an agreement with Seattle Computer Products to license an existing operating system known as 86-DOS, later purchasing the rights outright. Microsoft then adapted and further developed the software into what became MS-DOS for the International Business Machines personal computer. On the surface, this looked like a straightforward supplier relationship. International Business Machines received an operating system. Microsoft received a prestigious customer. But the agreement carried consequences that extended far beyond a single product launch. Unlike many traditional hardware contracts, Microsoft retained the ability to license its operating system beyond one manufacturer. That distinction became increasingly important as the architecture of the International Business Machines personal computer spread throughout the industry. The computer itself proved remarkably successful after its introduction in 1981. Just as important, its technical architecture encouraged compatibility. Companies such as Compaq demonstrated that machines could be built to run software designed for the International Business Machines personal computer while using independently manufactured hardware. The result was a rapidly expanding market of compatible computers. Every new manufacturer entering that ecosystem faced the same challenge. Customers expected their computers to run the growing library of software already available for the International Business Machines personal computer. Software developers wanted the broadest possible audience for their applications. Businesses wanted compatibility across different machines instead of rebuilding their software every time they changed suppliers. These incentives all pointed in the same direction. An operating system that could function across multiple manufacturers became increasingly valuable as more compatible computers entered the market. Microsoft did not have to persuade every customer to buy one specific computer. Instead, it licensed the software layer that connected customers, application developers, and hardware manufacturers. Meanwhile, the hardware companies competed intensely with one another. They improved performance, reduced prices, expanded distribution, and introduced new designs. Every additional computer sold into the compatible ecosystem increased demand for software that worked across that ecosystem. Without manufacturing a single personal computer of its own, Microsoft found itself positioned at the center of a market that was growing far faster than any one hardware company could have expanded alone. The company's most important strategic asset was no longer a programming language or even a single operating system. It was the position that operating system occupied inside an industry where more manufacturers entering the market no longer fragmented demand, but increasingly concentrated it around a common software foundation. This is the point where the usual explanation begins to fall apart. It is tempting to say that Microsoft succeeded because software was simply more profitable than hardware. Software did offer attractive economics. Once the initial development was complete, each additional copy could be distributed at a relatively low cost compared with manufacturing another computer. But that alone does not explain Microsoft's rise. Many companies wrote software during the same period. Very few became the foundation of an entire industry. The real advantage came from where Microsoft positioned itself inside the value chain. Hardware manufacturers had to compete on factories, supply chains, component prices, inventory, product cycles, and distribution. Every new generation of computers demanded another round of investment. Success depended on continuously building and selling physical products in an increasingly competitive market. Microsoft faced a different challenge. Its goal was not to persuade customers to abandon one manufacturer's computer for another. Its software became more valuable when more manufacturers joined the same compatible ecosystem. That changed the economics completely. Every company producing a compatible personal computer invested its own capital to expand the market. They competed to make computers faster, cheaper, and more widely available. Yet every additional machine capable of running MS-DOS also increased the potential customer base for Microsoft's software. Instead of competing against every hardware manufacturer, Microsoft benefited from their competition with one another. This created a reinforcing cycle. A larger installed base attracted more software developers. More applications made the platform more useful for businesses and consumers. Greater demand encouraged additional hardware manufacturers to enter the compatible market. Each new participant strengthened the attractiveness of the same software environment. The operating system gradually became more than a technical component. It became a common standard connecting computer manufacturers, software developers, businesses, and consumers. This explains why Microsoft's position became increasingly difficult to challenge. Replacing one computer manufacturer with another did not require customers to abandon the software ecosystem they already depended on. As long as compatibility remained intact, the platform continued to grow even while individual hardware companies gained or lost market share. That is a fundamentally different source of competitive strength. Owning a successful product allows a company to benefit from sales of that product. Owning the layer that allows many competing products to work together allows a company to benefit from the expansion of the entire market. Microsoft eventually entered hardware categories of its own, including computer peripherals, Xbox, and later the Surface family. Those products became important parts of the company's broader strategy. However, they did not create the original engine of Microsoft's expansion. The foundation had already been established years earlier through software licensing and a platform that could scale across manufacturers instead of being limited to one manufacturer's devices. Viewed from this perspective, Microsoft's decision not to build its own personal computer was not evidence of a missing capability. It was a deliberate strategic position. By avoiding direct dependence on a single hardware business, Microsoft gained access to something much larger. It placed itself where the growth of many competing companies could reinforce the growth of its own software platform at the same time. Looking back, The most important decision Bill Gates made was not choosing software over hardware. It was choosing which layer of the industry Microsoft wanted to own. The evidence throughout this story points in the same direction. Microsoft began by writing software instead of building computers. It treated software as intellectual property when much of the industry still viewed it as an accessory. It licensed its technology instead of tying it permanently to one manufacturer's machines. When the International Business Machine's personal computer established a widely adopted standard, Microsoft was positioned to provide the software that could extend across an expanding ecosystem rather than remain inside a single product. As compatible computers spread, Microsoft did not need to win every hardware battle. Its software benefited from the combined growth of companies competing against one another. That distinction explains why Microsoft's influence expanded even as the personal computer market became increasingly crowded. Individual hardware companies rose and fell. Some lost market share. Others disappeared entirely. Yet the common software layer continued to connect users, developers, and manufacturers across the industry. The source of Microsoft's strength was therefore different from what many observers assumed. It was never simply the operating system itself, nor was it merely the ability to write better software than everyone else. Its enduring advantage came from occupying the position where value from many different participants accumulated into a single platform. Once application developers invested in the platform, businesses standardized their workflows around it, and computer manufacturers expected compatibility. Every additional participant reinforced the value already created by everyone else. The platform became stronger because the ecosystem became larger. That is why Microsoft's rise changed far more than one company. It reshaped how the technology industry understood value creation. Before the personal computer revolution, competitive advantage often centered on building a superior machine. After Microsoft's model proved successful, an equally powerful strategy emerged. The company that controlled the common layer connecting many products could influence an entire market without manufacturing every product inside it. This pattern would later appear repeatedly across the technology industry. Mobile operating systems, cloud computing platforms, online marketplaces, and digital ecosystems all demonstrate variations of the same economic principle. The physical product remains important, but the layer coordinating relationships between users, developers, partners, and devices often becomes the source of the greatest long-term leverage. That is why Microsoft's story is not ultimately about avoiding hardware. It is about recognizing that the most scalable asset in a growing industry may not be the product customers hold in their hands. It may be the platform that allows millions of those products to work together. Bill Gates did not build Microsoft's empire by owning the computer that everyone bought. He built it by creating software that many different computer companies wanted to include, many developers wanted to build upon, and millions of customers came to depend on regardless of which manufacturer's machines sat on their desks. In the end, Microsoft's greatest product was never a particular computer. It was a platform that transformed the growth of an entire industry into the growth of the company itself.